Hi everyone, welcome to This Moment and the Diamond Mothering, presented by Caroline and Lisa.
Hello, and we are going to be illuminating the core of the feminine force as per usual when we go live. And today we've invited an amazing guest on. She is a death doula, Kylie Hutchinson, and I know her personally. I've enjoyed an evening of great conversation with her just recently as we're part of the Campfire Project, and that was fun to meet her in person. But I thought that because I had never heard about a death doula before, and this is actually becoming a certified course in Australia. And when I listen to Kylie and how she speaks about what she does, it's so clear that the feminine force is really working in her to be able to be authentic in her role and to support people. So welcome, Kylie. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's absolutely an honour that you invited me. Thank you.
Oh, welcome, Kylie. I'm really excited because there's a bit of a connection with Ireland and the doula. Actually, it was a friend of mine just said to me recently, he was talking about what Lisa and I are doing. And he said, Caroline, you're a doula, you're like doulas. And I hadn't actually realised it was an Irish term. And then actually Scott has told me about you recently. And I look back and through the Campfire Project was so excited to see what you're doing, like death doula. So excited to hear all about it, you know, so welcome.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And actually, it's beautiful with the Irish, because I had that conversation on Saturday night that the Irish do it really well, you know. They do, like, we can always learn a lot from how they do wakes and funerals, and yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So maybe the question burning on everyone's lips right now, or thoughts, is how did you get into being a death doula, and why?
Pretty much that's the first thing I'm asked, is like how and why. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know until I did my initial training in 2017. So I was in a position where I was working part-time and my son was sort of teenager, and I was like, maybe it's time to do a little course. And I was sort of looking around thinking, what direction might this head in? And I stumbled across an interview with someone, and they said, this is what they do. They trained as a death doula. And I was like, whoa, I need to know what that is. What's that? And looked into it, found a couple of different people in Australia that were doing the training, picked one that resonated with me and was like, gosh, it's really cool. And she got back to me straight away that day, which was so random, and explained it all to me. And I was like, yep, I'm in. So basically, it's an ancient term. Doula is an ancient term, and it means in service or of service. So basically, we're just there to help be of service to the person, whatever. So a lot of people, especially women, have heard of birth doulas, which is just someone who is there at the birth, coaches them through, advocates for them in birth, because there is a lot of medical intervention at that point that doesn't always need to be there, or they don't want this, or they do want that, or, be the person that they know and trust that go, yep, this is the right thing to be doing for you, baby, at this point. So death doula, exactly the same at the other end. Yeah. We're advocating for you. What is it you need? What is it you want? Do you want this medical intervention? Do you not want this? Do you want to have a frank conversation about what's happening? Again, a lot of medical intervention. And so there's that whole conversation around, is this what you really want to do? So that's what I do. How I got into it was, this initial training. When I heard of it, I just said, I've been doing that my whole life. I have, this is what you do. And I was like, yeah, I've done that. And I've held hand. And I was the one in there arguing, going, no, like, do we have to do this? And so it was knowing that I had been there and done that and seen that. And for my family, we talk about death, and a lot of families don't, but I grew up talking about death and, you know, okay, you have to go and spend time with Nan because she's old and she might die soon. So
very open about it. Yeah.
You know, that was just said at the dinner table with Nan sitting there. How old am I? You better come on over.
Kind of embracing it as part of life, you know, not hiding it away. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that I was in my 20s before I found that people didn't do that.
Yeah,
I was like, does everyone do that? Like, isn't that, you know, I remember someone saying, oh, I'm really surprised my grandmother died. I was like, oh my God, she was like 87, you know. What do you expect? Haven't you had that? Didn't you talk about that? But I still find it in my work. I still find people who are really sick with chemo that's gone, you know, having cancer that's gone everywhere, and they're like deteriorating slowly. And then someone will be like, do you think he might die? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
This may not kill him, but something will.
Yeah.
Everybody dies. Everybody.
Yeah.
Like, there's nobody getting out of this alive. So at some point, you have to face your own mortality, and you have to realize that you're going to lose someone. And we can do that. We can. It's like any other fear. It's really like any other fear. We can face it. We can prepare for it, and we can, you know, just make sure your paperwork's in order. That's my biggest thing. I'm really upset with people who don't have their paperwork in order.
Yeah.
45% of Australians die without a will.
Yeah.
We are one of the most taxed countries in the world, and if you die without a will, the government takes over and taxes you. Why are you paying more tax? Just do a will. 45% of you go without a will, and then it is chaos after that. So, you know, I'm big on that. I'm really big on just having these conversations. Yes, it's awkward. Yeah, it's not a nice subject, but you know, we have to face this. This is the reality, and we can ignore it, especially in Western culture. We're terrible at ignoring it. No, actually, we're good at ignoring it.
But it's actually, I think it's kind of well-being, you know, because like that, if you leave things and leave them and deny, and then it comes to the end and you don't do anything about it, then it just turns into this big issue, you know, where if you're more cognizant of it, and you're kind of preparing for it. And like, I suppose it depends on your culture as well, because like when I grew up in a small little village in the heart of the country. So it was very traditional when it came to, like, say my grandmother, when she passed away, like the whole of the family moved into her house for 3 days and 3 nights. So it was like all the grandchildren, all aunts and uncles, all the whole, like we were all lived there for 3 nights and 3 days and 3 nights, and the neighbors and everyone came in and she was in the house. So it was like just full of people and food and drink and everything, like for like 3 days and 3 nights until because traditionally they would have known spiritually, like that takes 3 days for them to fully pass, and that they wouldn't be left alone, and they'd have that kind of all the family around. But it was amazing. I remember I was 11, and every time it happened, that was the way it was done then, you know, that kind of way. But that has died away in Ireland. So like there's still, like my uncle died recently and he had to wake at home. And like there was actually, I'd say 3 days of people coming, so thousands of people came to the house kind of thing. But that's starting to move away. So it's kind of a dying art nearly, you know, and I just think, you know, there's so much depth in it, and it brings people together in a kind of celebration that, I loved when I heard about what you're doing, because it kind of is trying to hold on to that quality of the passing, you know, as a celebration kind of, and to kind of step into it and have a deeper understanding of what it means, like, you know. And I also love the fact that it's also, I think, just very traumatic for people when it comes to mental health. I know people in my family, and when they haven't, you know, when they just don't accept that death is part of life, that it can cause massive trauma, and it can actually cause massive breakdowns with people's mental health, you know. And, you know, it's brilliant that you're kind of talking about it and opening it up, and you have that kind of advocacy also for the person who's passing, because they're vulnerable, you know. So it's wonderful to have that service. Like, so it's fabulous to hear it in, you know, kind of in a contemporary way, you know what I mean? And you've got such a strong, confident voice to be able to speak up for people as well and make it fun, you know.
Yeah, look out. Don't get Kylie on the wrong side.
No, but she has a great balance of both, you know.
She does.
Yeah. You get away with a bit of that.
And she's very tall too, Carolyn. So she's actually she's very tall, right?
Okay.
So
that
it's
helps
good
too, I guess.
Yeah. But I was interested, Carolyn, that you were sort of saying it takes 3 days for the spirit to pass, you know, and I've read that before. But what interested me the other night, Kylie, you were saying how there actually is a process, like there are stages of death. And I thought, oh, wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same as so we always talk about in pregnancy the 3 trimesters, and now they're talking about the 4th trimester. So the 4th trimester is that little bit, you know, when the baby's first born and they're connecting and they should be really, you know, really well nourished and looked after, and the mother should not be cooking dinner. You know, nobody should be cooking. No woman who's given birth should be cooking dinner. She should be, you know, and that's that kind of 6 weeks afterwards, you know, you're still healing and everything's getting back to normal. And so, and then there's also an active labour when you give birth, there's an active labour. And so death is the same. There's these stages where people are declining, and you can kind of tell, there's this grey area that they talk about. They go, well, 6 months, you know, when you get to 6 months, that's your kind of, if someone ever says to you, you've got 6 months, then it's that's when you're in there, that stage. And that's when a lot of palliative care stuff, it can kick in before that, but it's this kind of grey area of, well, I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, so we can't tell. I mean, when you're having a baby, you kind of know that that's definitely not going to go longer than X amount of time, you know. But death, we don't have that, so we kind of, but there's indicators, there's things that happen, and you know, some people will last longer. Some people might last a year when they've been given 6 months, but you know, there's kind of indications of how that's going to go. And then there's the active dying phase, which you slip into. Some people do, some people don't. Like exactly the same as birth. Some people just go, oh my God, I'm in birth, I'm in labour, and then there's a baby. Other people are like 3 days of crazy, you know. So it's
3 days of crazy.
3 days of crazy.
Is that what you said?
You know, some women, they just and then it doesn't happen, and then it gets stuck, and medical intervention, and you know it.
Well, no, I was just thinking in terms of 3 days of crazy when you're dying.
Oh,
is that what happens when you're dying? Like 3 days of crazy? Oh my God, I'm dying. I guess it would.
It can be. There's such a thing as death anxiety, which I try really, really hard to minimize. And I have in my clients that anxiety in a lot of people is actually about this. There's no backing out of this here.
Yeah.
You know, we're in here now. And so there's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Whereas people who have faced that have less. It's like going into something prepared or going into something not prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly it's thrust upon you, and, you know, so it's not 3 days of crazy when you're dying, but it can be for the family around it if you're not ready.
Yeah.
You know, you go, okay, yeah, they're dying, and then suddenly it hits them. This person's dying, and it's going to happen in the next couple of days, and that's traumatic, and it triggers all sorts of emotions. It's a hugely emotional one, and it triggers all sorts of things for all sorts of people, and the family issues all come up, and it can be. You know, I mean, and I can do it remotely. I just did it for a friend of mine. Her stepdad was dying, and so there was a very complicated family history. And, you know, I was just on the phone to her, and she's like, what does this mean? And I'm getting a message about this. And I'm like, yep, this is, you know, we're getting close now. And, and she was okay, but it triggered a whole heap of stuff within the family. And, and so it can be. And then you have after death stage, which is, you know, the beautiful thing that the Irish do with 3 days of vigiling at home, and everyone comes around and everyone says goodbye, and everyone processes that this person has died.
Yes.
There's no ignoring it.
Yeah.
And the family is supported and people bring food and beautiful.
Yeah, and actually it brings a family closer together then as well. It brings all the different generations together, you know, and it teaches the younger generation how to do it, you know, like how to do it, you know. So when I seen it being done, you know how to do it then, you know, that kind of way it passes on the tradition, you know. So even though it's changed now, my father passed away in May, like he went to a funeral home, but that was like the choice of, I suppose, his partner and us, like, you know, it was more suitable, you know, for my dad, we'll say, you know. But the tradition of that, what we do, like up to it, he had a sudden death, I suppose. So, you know, up to it and around it, like you always try and include the younger generation, like bring them to the nurse, you know, not hiding it, you know, bringing them in and having them part of meeting everybody and meeting, you know, going into to see my dad. And even my mum's very sick as well. She's kind of, you know, in the process of, and, you know, trying to include them as much as you can in what's happening, you know, the kind of way, because then they know, because if not, they've no knowledge of how to do it when it comes to them, you know. It's just about teaching, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you get frightened of what you don't know about, right? The fear comes because you don't know about it. So the more you know about it and you've experienced, the less you fear. And I think it's that emotional thing, like Western culture. Really, I mean, this is what you and I do, Carolyn. It's like showing people how to understand their emotions and work with them. And if you shut down in that area, which our culture essentially does, how do you deal with something like death? Like that would just be the most freakiest thing, because it's true, you've got all this emotion. Even like Carolyn was just sharing before you got on, actually, Kylie, like having to work through her dad's documents and sort out the estate. And it's not about all the paperwork, which is incredible enough as it is. It's actually about all the emotion that comes up while you're doing that, you know?
Yeah. And the smell of cigarettes from all the paperwork. You still remember me. It's like you haven't gone far that.
Wow.
It's tough. And like my parents are in their 70s and dad's not well, and, you know, we've been threatening to clean the shed, dad's shed, you know. And we were there on the weekend and dad was away, and I was like, rightio. My sister-in-law was like, right, it's time. My brother was working on the outside, it needs some repairs to it. And she said, you know, it's time, we're cleaning the shed. And I was like, oh, okay. So here's me walking through the shed going, oh my God, I remember this. I've had this forever. And she was like, your brother's exactly the same. Now stop it and clean.
You're going down memory lane.
Oh my God, we've had this. I remember doing it. This is our esky from when we were kids. Why? We still got them, you know. But, it was, I was like, yeah, you do. And so that was just the shed, and he's alive. Like, house, and and the past, it's huge. It's like, and people think, oh, we'll just get in and clean it up. And you're like, no, it's a slow process. But if we know that people are dying, we can do that. So I have clients who are like, oh, well, you know, I'm starting to give away these things. They're like, oh, I don't want this anymore, and wonder if someone would want that. And I was like, well, that's a conversation, you know. Does your granddaughter really want that piece of furniture or that, you know, cut glass crystal vase? It's beautiful, but if she's got kids, you're like, what am I going to do with that, you know?
And it's amazing though as well, because, you know, the way it's a life lesson again, like how people get so attached to objects. And the minute somebody passes, like, then nobody wants any of the stuff, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, and, you know, get this, like, people are so attached to objects and you know, material things, like, you know. So I think that really teaches people not to be attached to the material, like, you know. It's always just the connection that you have with people is the most important, you know, kind of thing that you can keep with you all the time, never kind of diminishes, you know. So it's like all those things are, to me, I think they're kind of great lessons, like teachings, like just even the process of that, like when you step into it and you try to look at it at a deeper level, like what's it saying to you, you know, like, and the emotions are, like, it's definitely, if you're trying to embrace it from an early stage, it definitely helps, I think, you know. And I think I love what you're doing, because it's actually kind of more soothing. It's like soothing people along the journey. And especially I noticed with my grandmother, when she was 95 on her own. She was amazing. But like when she had a heart attack and went to the hospital, and they were trying to keep her alive. And I'm sitting there going, why are they trying to keep her alive? Like, you know, because she's 95. Could you not just let her peacefully pass? Like, you know, and like everyone around then not wanting to hold on to her and in denial of like what's actually happening. And I'm like, she's going to pass away. Like, you know the way. And it's just so hard for people. It's just like, I suppose, that control, isn't it? People don't want to let go of that control, you know, of their own lives, you know. Yeah.
And they don't want to let that control of other people as well. So you have like that situation. They have a lot of people where they go, oh no, we have to. And I've had it happen twice in my family. So on my dad's side, my auntie was living in home. She was 91. She started to have she had a fair bit of dementia. She wasn't, I mean, she still recognized us all. But yeah, she was living in the home, and the doctor came to us and said she has bone cancer in her leg, and we can save her life and remove her leg. And we all just went like, no. Why would we take, she's 91. She's in home. She has dementia, and she's going to forget that she doesn't have a leg. So she's going to injure herself getting out of bed. She's going to forget, and like she's not going to understand what's happening to her. Yeah. And that's just cruel. You know,
exactly.
My family were like, right, no, we'll just, you know, at this point, make sure she's not in pain, and you know, and it was only a few months later, maybe 5 months later, but we all got to see her and went and saw her and got all the photos, and we did all the stuff, and it was beautiful. And we were like, right. And then my grandmother on the other side had the same thing, had a heart attack, and went to hospital, and we were all gathered, this is it. Like, she's not going to survive this. She was, what was she, 84, 83 or 84. She's not going to survive it. And so we were like, okay, all right, okay. And so me and my mum and my dad on this side of the family are all like, right, this is it. And then this doctor walks out and says to my mum and her siblings, I can save your grandmother. Do you want me to do it? It's not invasive. It's this kind of steroid therapy, and it's all this medication and all this stuff. And do you want me to do it? And mum and I are like, no. You know, we knew what was happening, and she was already declining, and we're like, other circumstances in life. My grandfather had already died. She wasn't. Yeah, well, like, you know, she'd lost everything around her that she liked to do anyway. And we're like, no. And then the other three siblings were like, yes, do it. Yeah. Me and mum were like,
oh, I know. Yeah.
And, you know, they did it, and she was okay. It was touch and go, and she has 2 weeks of her life that she doesn't remember. And, you know, she lived for a few more years after that.
Mm-hmm.
But those years, that quality of life, and we asked her, I sat down with her and said, are you happy? Are you happy that the family made the right decision? And she said, well, I'm here. And I said, yes, but are you happy? She said, yes, I'm alive. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a point where you have to say, I don't know if this is the right thing, but she didn't leave the house after that. She needed all sorts of care. The treatment blew out veins and stuff, and she was constantly having to have iron infusions, and so she couldn't. It caused
suffering.
Yeah, like she wasn't in pain. Yeah. It's like this ongoing medical. Mum calls it the medical merry-go-round. It's like the next thing, you know. And so you've got
to go. Good for the medical profession.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose that's what a medical model is, you know, isn't it? Like, to keep people alive at all expenses, you know. So it's just, you know, it's just not, the holistic viewpoint isn't really integrated into that, you know.
Doctors are taught to keep people alive. It's their job to keep them alive, and if you die, they have failed at their job.
Yeah, that's
so
it. They'll do everything possible.
They do everything possible, even if that is not always in the best interest. And you have to be able to say, is this what I really want, or do I really want this?
Yeah.
you know, this stage of my life, yes, fight for me. I've still got a child who hasn't moved out home. Hopefully soon he'll get out.
Yeah.
But no, he's only 17. He's still really.
Oh, come on, give him a bit more time.
but you know, there's certain, but you get to a certain stage and you're like, okay, if I'm blessed enough to grow old, I want there to be quality of life. I mean, I have 91-year-old clients who live by themselves, who still walk in the shops, who, you know, they're amazing. They do all their housework. I just come in and vacuum. I'm like, what do you need me to do? She's like, I can't vacuum. Okay, I'll vacuum. And then what else? And then we'll sit there and plan, you know, all sorts of things for her. She's amazing. But there's
so how like when you I'm listening to you and I'm thinking you must have a certain quality of knowing inside of you, like even to be able to sit with other people's emotions. Like for me, learning how to be with my emotions enabled me to sit with whatever's going on with people. And that brings, like, for me, that's my feminine force. Like that activates like a real unshakable core within me. And there must be, you must have perhaps watched that grow with your work. Like when you're confronting people's emotions, it really inwardly for you, like your inner growth and how you came into being a more powerful, like in a good way, human being because of those experiences. Would you say that it's really influenced the way you've actually sat with yourself and sat in your own power?
Yeah, it's funny to see how I over the years you do little things and I would say, oh, I'm not going to do that, or I don't want to do that. But suddenly, you know, you're in a situation and it triggers you, and I'm like, oh, I can see how I did it. But being, I had this conversation with someone the other day about when it hits you and you feel that, and it's human nature to just respond with like, I've been triggered, I'm going to whatever, I'm going to explode, or I'm going to withdraw, or I'm going to tell you to go away. But noticing that in myself has been a massive journey, noticing when I am triggered by this and I am, you know, I just go, oh, I'm going to have to work on that in myself. And it's constant. Like I don't get it right all the time. And you know, the other doulas around me are incredible. You can ring one of them and they'll sort of gently point you out and go, well, how are you feeling about that? How are you handling that? So yeah, it is. It's a mass, and noticing, that's the biggest thing I think I've found, is me noticing that in myself and going, okay. And I mean, I still get triggered by my own mother. She'll do something and I go, oh God. But even just the other day, she was carrying on, and normally I would just react, and you know, it's years of programming, isn't it? But I was able to just go, okay, all right, let you go. No, we'll come back to that. We'll circle back to it. Walked away, and I was like, that's a much better thing. And on some level, I think, oh, I'm just finally growing up, you know. But it's not that. It's that personal growth that you have to constantly work on for yourself. Because I don't want to pass this on to my children or and I can see, especially as women, like really with women, there's that, you know, the mother wound stuff that comes up. But my mother said something to me, and I see her saying something to my nieces, and I'm just like, no, Mum, like I spent years undoing that, and I'm gonna stop. Yeah. I think every generation we just try a little bit harder, do a little bit. Yeah.
Do you think it's influenced the way that you've parented, like what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is definitely. I was really close to growing up. One of my friends' mums my parents were really strict. So they were the ones that were like, right, you are grounded. I spent, you know, a couple of years of my life grounded, really. I had iron whenever I was naughty. I was like, I have to do all the ironing for everybody in the house. To this day, I still detest ironing.
Wow.
But they would tell me, and they were really hard. Like if I was grounded for a month, it was a month to the day.
Wow.
I had parents, and all the other kids at school were like, "Oh, you just hang around and annoy them, and they get sick of you and tell you to go." And I tried that, and it didn't work. So I had the strict parents who didn't always talk about, I was a teenager in the 80s. There was AIDS and drugs were around, heroin, and not that they were there, but the ads were on TV. The Grim Reaper ads were on TV, and my parents were like, "Oh no, we're not going to really talk about that." And my friend's mum was this total hippie mum. Like she was like real hippie and talked about everything and just she was a nurse, and there was nothing taboo. She just spoke about all the stuff but she was also very free-spirited with how she parented. So looking at it now, I know she was total free-range parent, total free range. But for me, I actually said to her, I didn't quite want to be there, but I didn't quite want to be here.
Somewhere in the middle.
Where I kind of headed. And it's funny because I actually clashed with my friend the other day because my son played up, and of course he rang her, and she doesn't live far away. And she was like, "Oh, do you think you should do this?" And I said, No, I'm not going to do that. And she was like, "Oh," but I was like, No, I'm not doing it. You parent, this is how I parent. But it does. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you get to a free range parent. I'm pretty good. I'm not a helicopter parent, but I'm like.
But you know what you want. See, what I loved about what you said just then, and this is what I think so many mums, like we've lost that, because it's been almost our sense of worth, our sense of inner knowing, our sense of being able to contact our innate wisdom and go, I actually know what's best for my child. We have, that's almost been programmed out of us as women. So when we step into this mother role, when things happen, we're looking around for advice all the time, and we're listening to other people. We're not listening to ourselves. And that is where the real power resides. That's where the best solution is. And you've just gone, no. And I love it because it's just like, no.
I mean, that wasn't, I said no to her, and then I rang another friend and bawled my eyes out and was like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Like, I just need to do this, and he's being a shithead. And oh my God, I was like 2 days of panic, and then my kid got over it and told me he loved me, and I was like, oh God.
But every child is different as well. The way you have to parent them individually, and every parent is different. So it's unique, connection and relationship, that can't really be from the outside. You might get advice or support is always great, isn't it? But just being kind of, it's trial and error as well. But when you're trying to undo, you have to be really kind to yourself, because we have been all brought up in different ways like that. I was brought up when I was born in 1974, so like that in the 80s, like where things were, my parents were kind of it's funny actually, because I grew up in a very traditional, village kind of thing, but my parents were actually the most probably liberal there, so they had a kind of a liberal side to them, but yet it was enmeshed with traditional kind of Catholicism, so we were kind of, it was a bit of both, kind of way. So it was like the lines were blurred, that kind of way, because they were kind of 60s kids, so it was kind of like, my mom was very liberal and trying to break rules and stuff like that as well, but trying to keep us in line. So we were kind of a bit like, would you go here? You go there? What do you do? That kind of yeah, and then you're trying to understand the impact that had on you. And then understand what worked, what didn't work. And then, okay, how's that showing up now? And how can I heal myself through, the relationship with my child? And that's what we're talking about, the emotional emergent design process, nearly, so that when something happens with your child and you're having a reaction to it, it's showing you something that you haven't integrated in yourself. So you're using that as an opportunity to say, okay, right. There's something here that I'm unaware of. I need to learn about, or I need to look into, or I haven't had a chance to really think, where's this coming from? Is it from my mum? Is it from my dad? Is it from my, you know what I mean? And you kind of have that self-inquiry, you know. So it's that using the moment when you're kind of parenting to try and help yourself evolve, as well as giving the opportunity for your child to have their emotions and be heard and be seen, and, you know, be able to be not in the process of having to cover everything up like we did, you know what I mean, and push everything down, you know. So it's like they're evolving and you're evolving in the same moment. So that's what we're trying to kind of speak to, I guess. Like, it's a new way of mothering, you know.
I think, society puts that pressure on us. Like, I remember my mum, she still says it when we go out, she'd say, now you're representing the family, so you've got to be dressed up.
Holy moly.
Like you're going to mass, yeah.
You're representing the family, this is how, and I was and I was always the wild child, you know. And I always, from the spiritual point of view, you know, people say you get the child that you need. And so I'm this, like, I'm so opposite to my brother. We joke all the time that we don't think we lived in the same house. But we were parented very similar and a lot. And then, you know, as we got older, my brother seemed to have all this freedom, you know. And mum says to me, mum and dad always say, well, you needed the boundaries. You needed, you needed some hard lines, and your brother didn't need them. And I was like, he was getting away with way worse stuff than me. He was doing worse stuff than me. But you just never found, because you just were like, oh, no, he wouldn't do it. And I was like, he was such a follower. He ended up doing all sorts of stupid shit. You know?
They didn't know about. But was it because you were the girl as well? Sometimes, you know.
I'm the eldest. I'm the first born.
Your eldest. Oh, yeah. That's a draw.
And they, so they just I don't know.
They probably just got tired, you know. Parents get tired. It's like the effort sort of comes down with every kid.
It's like, oh, whatever. But there is, on some level, that's a patriarchal view. Oh, the girl needs the boundaries and the boys are okay.
Exactly.
They can handle themselves, you know. Whereas I've only got the one son, and for a few years there I had stepsons, and I definitely had to parent them differently. Kids and different personalities, but there was like, these are the rules in this house, and we will talk about how that works, and we will talk it out. I won't come down with a sledgehammer going, no, this is how it is. But it's interesting to see that coming up now, with my nieces and nephews, and me noticing it, that I'm like, that's definitely different because they're a boy or a girl, or and I think knowing that in yourself is a big thing. And I don't know how I got there. I really don't. I think there's a lot of trial and error. Definitely some moments when you're like, oh, damn, not my shining moment, you know.
You had some values. You know, like, it sounds to me like you had certain values that were important to you, and because you decided, like, early on that I'm not going to be completely free range with my child. So you had those values. So even though you didn't know in between those values, the values were still there. And like, that's a conscious choice, right? So I actually can't ever remember making a conscious choice with my earlier children, how I was going to parent, you know, and I don't even think I was really aware of what my values were. So I hadn't consciously sat down, and like Carolyn is still talking to me about consciously designing my life, right? And that is part of that conscious design, because I think when we actually make a choice and we go, well, what do I want? It's like, you know, even in relationships, when I'm working with women, it's like, well, have you decided how you want to be loved? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, can I make it? You know, so we just don't make conscious decisions about these things, and we should. You know, because that's the foundations for everything else that comes.
Because we don't think that brings choice in, you see. I suppose it happens first, like when you do the work on yourself, you're creating a space so that you have a choice, you know, that you can make a decision that's not from just reaction, that's just automatic. So then you have more control to choose. And then once you can choose, then you can design, you know, you can design what way you want to live your life, you know.
You can change your mind. You can say, well, you know what, I tried that and it didn't work, and so now I can design a different way.
Redesign. I think we're all in a big redesign, you know. That's what I look at it, you know. We're redesigning, you know, because like it's a stage though, like in humanity, like that we're at that stage that we can, you know, because we have the education and the knowledge now around like mindfulness, around all that, you know, how we can actually reprogram our brains like in so many different ways, that we can create a space of spaciousness that we can, you know, step into our control, the real control. Like we were talking about, you know, the death doula, like the parents and everybody wanting to control the situation. Like they're out of control really, you know, because they're not in control of their emotions. They're in control of actually the situation that's happening. They're not in life. They're not in the process of life. They don't understand, like, you know, in Celtic spirituality, that like, you know, everything is like cyclical. Like everything is, like when death is the same as life. It's all part of it, part and parcel. Like there's no death, it's only transformation. And it's the cycles of life. One of, you know, we all get passed on, you know, our roles are, you know, always changing kind of thing, you know, like even during our life, like my role will be changing soon now. My mum passes away, like I'll be the elder of the family, you know. Your role changes, it's always in motion and movement, you know, kind of thing. But I think like it's amazing to think that like there is a possibility to be more conscious around all those aspects of life in your relationship, but also how you deal with the transitions of life, you know. Like, you know, it's just, I suppose, bringing services that are kind of nearly ancient but making them contemporary and stuff like that is really exciting to me, because I think, like, you know, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of stuff that we have in life is, you know, okay, it might be modern, but it's not, there's no foundation. What's the foundation? Why is it there? Like, why are we throwing away practices that are ancient and that have actually deep spiritual knowledge that is only going to benefit humanity and has a deeper understanding of actually what's happening with the human psyche in the death, in the process of death, you know, in the process of life, in the process of the different transitions. You know, there's a need to have open those conversations, you know, and have a deeper understanding of that, I think, because that really feeds into mental health and wellness and well-being, and for all the generations, you know.
It is emotional, isn't it? Like the whole thing is emotional. It's like the more at ease with your emotions you are, the more you can step into that life force and you can go with that flow of whatever's happening, whether it's a parenting thing or a death thing.
Yeah, and actually the process that we're talking about is like the transition from the 8, 9 to, you know, 13. You know, that's a transition. It's like a death in one way, because it's the child dying and the teenager, you know, being born, you know. So it's like,
and even the mum's role. And see, this is what I think sometimes the issue is that the mum also has to change as her child becomes a teenager.
Exactly.
But the mum doesn't think that she does. The mum's seeing the daughter change and wanting to control that, but she doesn't realise that to step into the emerging process with her daughter and to let that past die and come into a new form of relationship with her daughter is the solution to a lot of the things that actually create problems as the child, the girl's emerging.
She's going into this another season of her life as well, you know. It's like going into, like I was saying, the bud blossom flourishing, like, because it is actually a kind of creative time, and it's an opening for women, like, to go back and find out, you know. I mean, it's difficult raising small kids, and there's a lot of yourself that you have to kind of deny, you know, you have to set aside. So I think instead of thinking and seeing it as a difficult time, seeing it as a time transition into, you know, celebrating yourself, you know, and coming into things that you enjoy and that you like, and finding more new richness, like, you know, kind of thing in your life. So it's just a different way of looking at things. And I suppose, you know, society always loves to paint a negative picture about everything, and, you know, like teenage age, it gets bad rap, like, doesn't it? But like, it's such a lovely time to have teenagers, you know, because they're so full of fun, and they bring, you know, lots of life and excitement and you know, fun and, you know, creativity. You know, it's a great time, actually. You know, it's lovely to have teenagers. I really love having teenagers, you know. I find it great fun. My grandmother used to say that as well. She said, actually, them in that stage because they're kind of, you know.
It's an amazing stage, and I remember having a rant on Facebook and said, I don't know why nature designed this, that he's a teenager right as I hit menopause. This is a real design flaw, you know. Who did this? And I was like, this is stupid. One of us won't survive this. But someone spiritually said to me, but that is, you know, like teenage women, especially heading into that, they're heading into that maiden just as we're heading into that crone kind of.
Yeah.
They're at the start and we're at the end of that. Yeah. And you go, wow, like when you look at that as a transitional thing, that's your own grief as well. Like your own grief about I'm losing that stage of my life, and you know, my body is changing and looking different. My skin's driving out and I've got all the wrinkles and grey hair, and look at these young vibrant ones, and there's this, you know, you've got to go, I just think, oh, I'm so good with the grey hair. I'm happy I'm getting the grey hair now. Because now I can let that go, and I can really just embrace the grey hair and stop dyeing it. And you know, and these ones are coming through, and I'm like, oh, they're heading into that stage where they're going to spend money on makeup and nails. And
It's interesting though, isn't it? Like I actually remember when the first time I missed a period, and because I've got two daughters, one's 24 and one's 15, and this was a couple of years ago, and I remember saying to my older daughter, oh, maybe I could be going through menopause soon. Yeah. And she sort of looked at me, and we both burst into tears. We both just were so upset that because that was our connection, right? Like, so we would all have a period at the same time because we all lived together, and it was like, we really were so upset, and she was upset. She was as upset as what I was. Wow. And we just stood there and we're like hugging each other, like just grieving because of this. And like, I would never have expected that we both felt like that in that moment, you know.
That's amazing.
And it was a really special moment, really.
Yeah. But you are going to grieve that. And there's something that I send to people when people die, but when they're just, it doesn't matter if it's a divorce or a loss of a job, all sorts of things have caused the death of something. And it says to love someone is to watch them die 1,000 times. And it's so many different things that die, and like they no longer do this and now they do this, or they've grown out of that and they do this. And you watch your child grow, and that's what they grow. You have to watch them grow, or you can't just stop nice little age.
The death of an identity that you had about yourself, you know. That's why I said, actually it's funny you said that line, because I have written that line in a book that I haven't published yet. I died 1,000 times in this lifetime. You know, people talk about different lifetimes. We die every day, you know, like we wake up a new person each day, you know, that kind of way. We're not the same person because we've had a different experience from yesterday. We have a different outlook. We have a different, everything is different, you know, like, so so you're always dying, you know, you're dying to yourself. So it's it's like a redesign each day, a new iteration, you know, and it's like, if you're conscious of that process of life, you know. Otherwise, you're living in a version of yourself that was 30 years old, you know, or when you have a relationship with somebody who hasn't progressed with you in your growth, they're having a relationship with you from 20 years ago. And that's when, you know, problems arrive in relationships, when people don't.
But there's a child.
Exactly. Can you be with the new updated version that's right in front of you here now?
The fight with my son the other week was about him. He said, I'm independent. And I said, yeah, but you're not responsible. Independent, like, you're not yet here. So it was a massive fight. He's going, I'm responsible. So not. But he is to a level, but not quite there, but he's getting it. But it was a real moment where I had to go, all right, I have to let him do a little bit more.
Yeah, and like it's allowing them to grow, you know what I mean? Giving them space to make those mistakes as well, you know, because that's the only way they're going to grow, isn't it? You know? Yeah. You know, we all had to do it.
It's not a lot of fun though.
We're still learning.
Yourself as well and say, well, like I just had my mother come out of my mouth. Is that really?
That's the scariest thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the hour, and we've had, like, I know how quickly did that conversation go. So good. Kylie, it would be really amazing if you could just look back over your past and the experiences you've had, and like just think about something that's really helpful for people to actually be able to come into an acceptance and an allowance of that process of death. You know, if there's some little key or some little hint or some little hot tip or some hack, a death hack, you know, like, isn't that what they call them? Like,
Wow.
Oh my God.
Maybe you could start that niche, you know, like death hacks. It's like helping people do death simply.
I think that I think I said this to you the other night on Saturday night, Lisa. Someone asked me the same similar thing, and they said, well, how do you do what you do? And I was like, I'm the one that walks into the room when everyone else is like, oh, I'm like, whoa, check out that elephant. Look at it. It's giant pink elephant. You know, that's me. I'm the one that's like, I will just say it. And you can't face this until you acknowledge that it's there. So even if today it's a little step that, you know what, one day I'm going to die and someone's going to have to clean up this mess, or someone's going to go through my browser history, or like a little click today, you know, someone's going to have to find this stuff in that drawer. It's like just a little bit, even if it's today, a little bit acknowledging that, you know, and I'm the one, like, I've got a friend that is a real hoarder, and every time I try and help her clean up, I'm like, I'm not doing this when you die, you know. And and it's a slow process, but she eventually, you know, will get there, and she'll say something like, oh yeah, I'll have to clean this up before I die. Yes, exactly, unless you want me just throwing everything out, you know. It's just that little bit, just accept that you're not going to get out alive. Nobody does. So start to think about do you want this stuff? Is this really important? Or the really important stuff, is it done? Like, you know what? Tell people off about doing their will. But that's huge. I've got one friend who's owned his house for 18 months and still doesn't have a will. And I'm like, why don't you have a will? You have to have a will. You own stuff now, like you owned stuff before, you know. But as soon as you've got a car, you really need a will. But somebody's got to deal with it. But he owns a house and he doesn't have children. He's not married and he doesn't have children. And I'm like, what are you going to do with this? And then the other day there was a big fire near his work, and he messaged me and was like, if I die, then this. I was like, oh, I'm pretty true, finally, you know. But I
think it's fear as well, Kylie, though, isn't it? Like fear, like, but it's a simple process. Like even from learning in the last couple of years with my family as well, like it's not complicated. It's just a fear. That's, you know, people not facing it, you know, having a conversation, you know.
Conversation. Make sure you say things clearly. Make sure you write down. But you don't have to do all that in one day. It's just a little bit today, a little bit of a conversation later on. You know, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to write down your passwords and get your will done, and you don't have to decide what you want for your burial song. You don't have to do all that. It can just be little conversations that just over the time. Yeah. And
like even like casually, you know, because I know it's even my mum trying to break, because it's difficult to bring things up, but like, you know, over a cup of tea, just like, oh, you know, I was thinking maybe we might look at this now, you know. And it's the minute you open up the conversation, like the pressure, it's like you just a release valve. It just depressurizes the whole your whole body, you just go, whew, she started to have the conversation now.
Yeah.
Like it just unfolds from there then, you know, it's just breaking the ice, you know.
Yeah, it's breaking the ice. And it's just those little things that you just, even in something, you just saw something and go, oh, that was just awful. I don't want that when I make sure nobody does that to me, you know, or or I've had people go to a funeral and just went, oh my God, that was just terrible. Like I've come home and told my husband, I'm not going that, don't do that, you know. I don't want that sort of thing happening. And so it's those little bits that start. Yeah.
So good starting to open up this conversation. I think it's really a healthy thing, you know.
Absolutely.
Because you've got to face your fears, haven't you? It's empowering.
Yeah, but you guys are amazing. I love what you're doing here. So cool.
Thanks, Kylie. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for watching the replay. A reminder that this week we start our first teaching for mothers and daughters on Friday, and we're going to be dealing with issues of secrecy, isolation and depression. So if you would like to come along, we're doing a teaching which is really like leading edge emotion education, conscious design and non-dual thinking, all wrapped into one program, teaching about stillness and listening and actually dealing with those issues. So we're really excited. We sort of workshopped what we were going to do yesterday. Carolyn and I were like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. So we'd love you to join us. If it's something that resonates for you, there's a link underneath. And there's also a link to Kylie. So please connect with her. She's an awesome human being and also an incredible death doula. And have a beautiful rest of your evening or day.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kylie, for coming on. And I'm so glad to have a chance to talk to you eventually.
I know, we will get there. No, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks,
guys.
Thanks,
everyone.
thanks, Adam and Olivia, for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.